What's up, fam? Welcome back to another chilling chapter. Before we dive into today's twisted mystery, Father Brown, and darkest sin in village history, hit me up. What made you smile today? And where in the world are you listening from? I'm featuring your stories in the next drop, so don't be shy. Now grab your tea, dim the lights, and get ready, because nothing in Whispers in the Fog is ever what it seems. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Spectre in the Churchyard. A heavy mist clung to the quiet village of Kembleford, distorting the outlines of gravestones into ghostly whispers beneath the teal sky. Parson's Green Church was a sanctuary amidst the swirling grey, though this morning shadows crept more heavily within its stone walls. It was in this disquieting gloom that a peculiar scene awaited detection. An unearthly figure, dressed in a flowing shroud, emerged from the depths of the churchyard, commandeering the attention of every soul within the vicinity. Father Brown, returning from his early morning prayers, paused mid-step on the path leading to the graveyard when he stumbled upon the unsettling sight. The figure moved with purpose, drifting like an apparition, lips whispering silent prayers, or perhaps sinister incantations. Clenching the collar of his clerical coat, he adjusted his spectacles and blinked hard, hoping to banish the trick of the light. But it was no trick. The spectre, unmistakably, was real. Before his mind could catalogue the details that made up the scene, its flowing white shroud, the tattered hem brushing against the grave markers, Father Brown noted the muffled gasping of young Abigail Harkness behind him. She was a timid creature, the kind who fled at shadows, yet something compelled her to step closer. It's her," she stammered, pointing a trembling finger toward the emerging figure. "Her?" Father Brown turned his attention back to the spectre, the figure now kneeling beside a fresh grave, a small mound of earth, unsettled in the light of day. With a swift motion, it placed an ornate bouquet at the stone headstone, the flowers stark against the day's pallor. "Yes, Mrs. Thistlecroft, long live her spirit," Abigail declared boldly, a contrast to her earlier timidity. "Mrs. Thistlecroft?" Father Brown inquired, a contemplative look crossing his brow. He had known the late Mrs. Thistlecroft not well, but enough to remember her fierce, independent nature during her days as the village's leading herbalist. "She passed a week ago, did she not?" "Yes," Abigail replied, voice dropping. "Not peacefully, they say." Her eyes darted nervously in the direction of the creaking church door, as if anticipating the arrival of someone, or something. The spectre stood, the subtle cloak billowing around it like a shroud, and began to move toward the church. Father Brown, spurred by curiosity, stepped into the graveyard, mere feet behind the ethereal figure. With a final, lingering look toward the grave, the spectre clasped the door handle, an iron latch that rang out like a tolling bell, and disappeared inside. "You must stay here, Abigail," he whispered. He slipped through the door just as it creaked shut behind the figure. A trickle of daylight helped peel back some shadows within the church, illuminating the carving of the Last Supper on the oak paneling, while dust motes danced lazily in the air. His heart raced. The thought that the ghostly figure of Mrs. Thistlecroft might still walk amongst the living ignited his intuition. He scanned the room, but the spectre was nowhere to be found. "Are you in need of guidance, my dear?" came a voice from the shadows. Startled, Father Brown turned to see Miss Selina Pembroke, the church's volunteer caretaker, peering from behind the lectern. Her expression transformed from apprehension to something resembling an eyebrow-arched inquisitiveness. "Did you see her?" he asked, urgency slipping into his tone. "See who?" she replied, feigning a demure innocence. But the gilt-sharpness in her gaze betrayed her. She had seen something, and she knew far more than she let on. "Mrs. Thistlecroft," Father Brown pressed. "A figure dressed like her just passed through here." Selina's lips quirked into a sly smile. "Ah, the forlorn spectre of your dearly departed herbalist. Such tales spice up the dull life of Kembleford, don't they?" Her nonchalant demeanor masked a deeper apprehension, but Father Brown had seen emotion twinkle in her eyes, fear, regret. He turned to leave, but something caught his eye, a small crumpled scrap of paper on the floor. Kneeling to pick it up, he felt his breath hitch. The handwriting was tremulous, perhaps on the cusp of madness. "Find solace at the hour of her return. The heart holds secrets unyielding." "Selina," he began, his voice a low octave. "This paper, it speaks of a return. Is there something we should know about Mrs. Thistlecroft? That old witch. Is that what she desired? Revenge, perhaps," she muttered, and for a fleeting moment, Father Brown glimpsed the mask of tranquility slip, revealing an inner tempest. With a sudden clang, the church bells chimed ominously, and Selina drew back, her eyes darting toward the crooked window, as if expecting a phantom to break through. "I must go, Pastor. There's nothing further to discuss," she insisted. With that, she made her hurried retreat, leaving Father Brown alone amidst the flickering candles. Something was brewing in Kembleford, and it was more than just spectral visitations. The atmosphere weighed down upon him, thick with uncertainty, like a flask of trouble bubbling just beneath the surface. As Father Brown turned back to inspect the paper, in the dim light, he sensed yet another presence. The church door rattled slightly, and without turning, he knew someone emerged from outside. The air prickled. "Father Brown, I was hoping to find you before the afternoon service," called a familiar voice, and he spun around to see Inspector Mallory stepping into the church, his face taut with some troubling news. "Inspector, what troubles you?" Father Brown asked, apprehension stirring deep within him. Mallory inhaled sharply, his expression grave. "It's Glenwood Manor, Mrs. Thistlecroft's house. There's been a disturbance. You'd better come quickly." With his heart now racing, Father Brown followed the inspector into the shrouded past. Behind them, the flower offerings before the freshly turned grave began to wilt, whispering secrets only the stillness of the churchyard could ever know. What lay in wait at Glenwood Manor had begun a tale entwined with shadows and woven with dread, leaving Father Brown with more questions than answers, a myriad of choices gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. Someone was hiding something, and by the time the next chapter unfolded, perhaps it would become perilously clear. Every ghost had their reasons, and secrets were just waiting to be unearthed. Chapter 2. An alibi that shatters. The morning fog hung thick and heavy over Kembleford like a shroud, blanketing the quaint village in an ethereal silence. As Father Brown walked along the cobbled path to St. Mary's, the distant tolling of the church bell echoed through the stillness, each clang resounding with a haunting clarity. It was here, in the embrace of the mist, that he was met with an unsettling scene. The door to the old Hawthorne Manor stood ajar, creaking slightly in the breeze. Father Brown's instincts prickled with unease as he approached, brushing aside the morning dew clinging to the grass. He had reported the death of Lady Henrietta Hawthorne a mere day before, stealing the life from the manor which had seen generations of the Hawthorne family. But today was different. The air was charged with tension, a quiet desperation. When he pushed open the door, it groaned on its ancient hinges, revealing a dimly lit hall adorned with portraits of long-gone ancestors whose lifeless eyes seemed to follow him. "Mrs. Elmsworthy?" Father Brown called tentatively in the empty hallway. The housekeeper, normally so diligent, had left a candle flickering on the mantelpiece, its light casting dancing shadows over the faded wallpaper. "Is anyone here?" The sound of soft footsteps reached his ears, and moments later, Mrs. Elmsworthy appeared, her face drawn tight. "Father, I'm glad you're here," she stammered, her hands shaking. "You need to see this." She led him through the dim corridors to Lady Hawthorne's study, a room adorned with rich mahogany furniture and shelves lined with musty tomes. In the center of the room, sprawled on the floor, lay a man, Lord Jonathan Hawthorne, Lady Henrietta's estranged brother. A pool of crimson glimmered beneath his head, and as Father Brown knelt beside the body, he noted the distinct line of a crumpled piece of parchment clutched in his rigid fingers. Mrs. Elmsworthy gasped behind him as he gently pried the note free. It bore a hastily scrawled message. "I know what you did." Father Brown's brow furrowed as he considered the implications. Who had Jonathan been threatening, and why had the letter seemingly remained undiscovered until now? "Father," she quavered, he was out in the village last evening. I saw him in the Red Lion pub, boasting about his entitlement. He claimed he held evidence that could destroy this family. So he was not here during the time of Lady Hawthorne's death, Father Brown mused, furrowing his brow. An alibi that shatters indeed. Mrs. Elmsworthy nodded, her voice trembling. "And now he's dead, murdered, and I suspect that whoever did it knew he would disclose their secrets." Father Brown rose, his mind spinning the threads of a deeper plot as he examined the study for any further clues. He noted the way the air was heavy with the scent of violets, Lady Hawthorne's favorite flower, and the slight disarray of the room. Books thrown about, papers scattered across the desk. It was as if a violent struggle had taken place. "Gather the villagers," Father Brown instructed quietly. "We need to speak with them about last night. Someone must know what Lord Jonathan was up to." Within the hour, the faded light of day struggled against the encroaching fog as villagers gathered in St. Mary's, their faces shadowed with apprehension. Father Brown addressed them, his gentle voice steady, lingering just long enough to draw their fractious attention. "Last night, Lord, Jonathan was spirited away into the depths of alcohol, spouting threats and bitter secrets. Yet now he lies dead, his hand clutching a letter that alludes to dark intercessions against his own family." His gaze hardened. "Do any of you know what evidence could cause such destruction?" The crowd shifted uneasily. Mrs. Elmsworthy watched from the back, her expression inscrutable. "I heard gossip that he had been seen arguing with Miss Agnes, the vicar's daughter. They said she was hiding something from her past." Father Brown's mind raced. Agnes, with her bright smile and kind disposition, had always seemed devoid of malice, yet was there an unseen depth to her character? The revelation cast an unsettling shadow over her pure facade. "May we speak to Miss Agnes?" Father Brown asked, directing his query toward one of the villagers. A young man, reminiscent of a whippet, appeared as though in response, eyes wide with confusion. "Agnes is at the vicarage, but I doubt she had any part in this," he stuttered, wringing his hands. "Doubt is merely the shroud of truth," Father Brown said, stepping forward. "You must summon courage from the depths of your conscience. We must lay these shadows to rest." As he turned to lead the way to the vicarage, a sudden commotion broke through the fog. Mrs. Elmsworthy dashed forward, pale as a ghost. "Father, you must come with me." Her teary eyes sparked an urgency that sent a chill down Father Brown's spine. Emerging from the gloom of the manor, she took his arm and led him toward the garden, where a splintered view of morning sunlight pierced through the murky air. They stood before an exquisite rose bush, blooming with vigor, and nearby, on the ground, lay a crystalline object, glittering ominously amidst the grass. "A brooch," Father Brown said, kneeling to inspect it. The delicate filigree design bore the unmistakable insignia of the Hawthorne lineage, albeit smeared with blood. A shattering realization struck him. "Mrs. Elmsworthy," he began, his voice grave, "there are more secrets buried here than you know. These cannot be the actions of a mere thief." His eyes narrowed as he recalled that fleeting moment of doubt in the villagers' gazes. The pieces were coming together, but to whose advantage? Just then, a figure appeared at the edge of the garden. It was Agnes, her face pale and her lips trembling. "Father, please," her voice quivered. "I can explain." The air thickened with tension, the fog seemingly closing in as Father Brown's heart raced. What further truths lay beneath her pleading gaze? The tides of suspicion shifted, and as he prepared to speak, the ominous chill of an unfolding mystery wrapped tightly around them, leaving only the haunting echo of unanswered questions lingering in the still air. Chapter 3. The Letter That Arrived Too Late. The suffocating shroud of mist clung to the cobblestones of Kembleford, allowing only the most tentative slivers of dawn to pierce the shadowed streets. It was in this atmosphere of eerie tranquility that Lucinda Emery's lifeless body was discovered in the rectory garden, a tableau of horror nestled among the wilting dahlias. Father Brown had been summoned hastily, the air thick with whispers and heavy breaths as the villagers gathered, their eyes wide with disbelief. Father Brown pushed through the crowd that had gathered around the gravesite, his brow furrowed in thought. Lucinda, the village's beloved schoolteacher, had often been seen flitting about with her armfuls of books, a perennial smile lighting up her face. The father knelt beside her, observing not merely the still figure lying in the damp earth, but the scattering of leaves and broken twigs around her. There was something not right, an unnatural stillness that spoke volumes, even louder than the gasps of the onlookers. "Quite a trench for a grave," murmured Inspector Mallard, his voice a low rumble, heavy with dread. "The doctor believes she's been stolen from life, Father. Poison, most likely." "And the note?" Father Brown probed, ignoring the unease pooling in his stomach. Eager fingers had already passed a letter to the inspector, found crumpled in her pocket. Mallard frowned. "Sent yesterday from a friend in London. The contents, well, they match the usual. Gossip. Nothing useful to us." Father Brown took the letter, noting the hasty, untidy handwriting as he read through the brief message. The words tumbled over one another. "I have found something out. Be cautious. Do not trust." The final words had been smudged, possibly from rain or tears, leaving Father Brown with an unsettling feeling. Why had it been sent on the very day of her death? And if it contained a warning, whose trust had Lucinda betrayed? "I heard she had gotten herself into some mischief," croaked Mrs. Willoughby, a stout lady with a reputation for knowing everyone's business. "Always had that wild look, Lucinda did. They say she was after something." "Or someone," Mallard added, casting a sideways glance at Father Brown. Misdirection often points to a deeper truth, does it not? Using the last of the misty morning to his advantage, Father Brown made his way back to the church, thoughts whirling in unison with the spectral fog. As he entered the rectory, he was met by the hapless assistant, Cyril, who stood pale and trembling near the old organ. "Father, I can't believe it," Cyril stammered, brushing an anxious hand through his hair. "I should have told you. Lucinda received an unexpected visitor the day before. A man I did not recognize, but she seemed quite taken by him." "Who was he?" Father Brown inquired sharply. "Dee didn't say, just came and left in a hurry. I'll fetch you some tea." Father Brown's eyes remained locked on Cyril. The assistant's movements were twitchy, clearly agitated. Perhaps he knew more than he let on. "Cyril, do be mindful and stay near. I have a feeling that you are more involved than you realize." As Cyril shimmied away, Father Brown examined the modest desk cluttered with stacks of papers. An educator's mess, he thought, but the disorganization bore closer scrutiny. Delicate lilies drawn in ink, margins filled with frenetic writing about local happenings, and a single line caught his attention. The secret of the manor, if only Lucinda had listened. He skimmed further, unlocking memories of whispers shared among parishioners, a manor house looming just outside the village, abandoned yet alive with secrets. "Father," came a panicked voice, interrupting his thoughts. It was Mrs. Willoughby, wringing her hands. "You must return to the garden. There's something more about the letter." Father Brown followed hastily, his mind racing. This abrupt urgency might shake the very foundation of their investigation. Upon reaching the garden once more, he noted that the crowd had swelled, gossiping citizens pointing to a pair of boots half buried in the earth near Lucinda's body. "They belonged to the man she was seen with," Mrs. Willoughby gasped, her face pale as paper, eyes wide with fear. Mallard examined the boots, frowning. Could it be some form of misdirection? He adjusted his cap as he glanced at Father Brown. "A setup, perhaps?" "No, Inspector," Father Brown replied soberly. "These boots are caked in fresh soil. The man must have troubled himself to bury something. But what?" As the crowd gasped and murmurs rippled through the air, Father Brown leaned in closer, running his fingers over the contours of the earth. Each brush brought a curious thought. A dangerous game was afoot, and no one, it seemed, was beyond suspicion. "Tread lightly, Inspector," he warned. "We are hunting for shadows, and where shadows fall, secrets linger." Just then, a low cry came from the back of the gathering. "It's the postman. He's got something." All eyes turned towards a beleaguered figure, pushing his way through, holding something aloft. A second letter, damp and crumpled, evidently sealed but unaddressed. "Father Brown." The postman's voice quilled into the cold morning air, heavy with portent. "It was meant for Lucinda, left at my house, but I've only just realized it bears witness to a clandestine meeting at the manor tonight." The onlooker's breath hitched in unison, and Father Brown's heart quickened. A young woman lay dead, with a warning too late to save her life, and now a sinister meeting lured the villagers' fears into the twilight. With instincts honed by years, Father Brown felt the threads of a greater mystery twisting around him. "Gather everyone," he commanded. "It is time we discover who will meet at the manor this evening, before this tragedy unfolds further." Eyes brimmed with trepidation, and the villagers turned towards the fog-blanketed path leading away from the rectory. The clues had made themselves known, but only time would tell if they pointed to the murderer hiding beneath their beloved village's veneer. Father Brown felt a sharpened resolve. Something unnameable was brewing in the fog, and he could sense that it was far from over. Chapter 4. Secrets Beneath the Surface. The mist curled through the narrow lanes of Kembleford, wrapping its tendrils around the ancient stone buildings and enchanting the village with an eerie stillness. Only the faintest sounds of rustling leaves and the occasional creaking of timber echoed in the cool morning air. It was here, amidst this quietude, that Father Brown found himself drawn to the churchyard, where a tragedy had already begun to unfurl. As he approached the modest graves, planted solidly in the earth, he instinctively felt that the very ground harbored secrets, secrets only too willing to reveal themselves. A sudden rustle distracted him, and he turned around. A figure emerged from the fog. It was Mrs. Winifred Grayson, the village librarian, her always impeccable attire now rumpled and disheveled. The tremor in her voice belied her reputation as the know-it-all of Kembleford. "Father," she gasped, I found something terrible." His brow furrowed with concern as she led him deeper into the fading morning light. They crossed the cobblestone path and ventured toward the back of the church. There, concealed beneath a tangle of thorny bramble, lay a shallow grave. The ground was freshly disturbed, its dark earth betraying frantic diggings. Father Brown's heart raced as his breath caught in his throat. Mrs. Grayson's hand, trembling, motioned for him to lean closer. "What is it?" he asked, barely whispering, as if the very air could stir the malefactor to life again. With a trembling finger, she brushed away the debris, revealing what seemed to be a tattered leather-bound book, the pages yellowed and frayed. Father Brown stooped down, turning the book over in his hand, noting its deep scratches along the spine. Words were inked in an elegant script, but they appeared muddled with blotches, remnants of time, mixed with the dampness of the earth. "It belonged to Edgar Hayes," Mrs. Grayson declared, igniting the next blaze of anxiety. Edgar, the local artist, had vanished a week earlier, sending ripples of concern throughout the tight-knit community. It was said he'd been working on something significant, a painting, his magnum opus. Father Brown's eyes skimmed through the pages. Words of poetry, hesitant sketches, words beseeching peace, and an end to violence entwined with shadows of creatures, lurking at the edge of darkness. Each page was steeped in a tone of despair, revealing the tortured mind of a man grappling with his demons. It concluded abruptly. The last words were cut off mid-sentence, and a sense of desperation hung in the air. "My husband," Mrs. Grayson took a shaky breath, her tone sharpening with accusation. "He insisted Edgar was an impostor, a fraud. Perhaps oh, but God forbid." "Hold your thoughts, Mrs. Grayson," Father Brown said gently, noting the flicker of conflicting emotions in her eyes. "Emotions can blind reason. Didn't you say he was working on a commission for the village? Perhaps your husband had other motives, jealousy, perhaps, or competition." A noise startled them both. Footsteps approached. It was Inspector Mallory, his broad frame drawing their attention as he stepped through the fog, features hard under the low morning light. "Father Brown, Mrs. Grayson, what are you doing out here?" The inspector's voice was commanding, yet curious. Father Brown began, but stopped short as a shadow flitted across Mallory's face, an expression that hinted at unease. "We found this." He held up the book, but quickly resumed his thoughts. "This is potentially Edgar's. It might provide insight into his disappearance. Inspector Mallory took the book, flipping through the dog-eared pages. "Nothing but nonsense," he grunted, casting it aside. The man was a fool, wasting his life on pretentious ramblings. If you ask me, he was quite capable of leaving town unceremoniously. "Or unable to," Father Brown countered, a small smile breaking through his seriousness. "People's innermost secrets often lie beneath the surface, hidden just like this grave. We must delve deeper." The inspector scoffed. "As if it's that simple. What is this folk superstition? The village fancies itself a place of mystery, yet nothing exists without a clearer explanation. People leave for reasons more banal than we want to believe." As they stood amid the fog, the tension between the men grew palpable. Father Brown could sense the currents of animosity bubbling just beneath the surface. "Then why, don't you enlighten us, Inspector? Why the ongoing dismissal of Edgar's talents? Rumors touch upon desperation, a fear of his possible revelations." Mallory's jaw tightened, and it dawned on Father Brown that Edgar's disappearance was more than just an artist's folly. It was a crack in the facade of Kembleford itself. "Stay away from the brushstrokes of fate, Father," Mallory retorted. "Some truths are better undiscovered." The inspector's words hung in the air like a warning bell. Father Brown's eyes narrowed, capturing the fleeting glance of Mrs. Grayson as she exchanged a look with Inspector Mallory, a flash of something unnameable passing between them. The plot thickened, and Father Brown saw clearly now. Theirs was a tapestry woven with threads of envy and fear. Just before Inspector Mallory turned to leave, Father Brown interjected, "Perhaps it's best we examine Edgar's studio. Hidden away, secrets may cry out to be revealed." Mallory hesitated, annoyance flickering behind his eyes, but curiosity bound him momentarily. They strode towards Edgar's home, a solitary manor shrouded in mist and neglect, its creaky doors protesting at their footsteps. Once inside, the atmosphere shifted, charged with an urgency pulsing through the air. There, half shuttered against the light, stood the easel, a chaos of canvases strewn, some half-finished. "Look," Mrs. Grayson gasped, pointing dramatically. There, amidst the art supplies, sat a piece triumphantly revealed, draped hastily with a rag, the painting that might hold the key to Edgar's fate. Father Brown's breath quickened, for he knew now that the surface was merely the beginning of the depths they must uncover. Just as he reached out to pull the rag away, a creak startled them, the old wooden floorboards protesting underfoot. From the shadows cast by the growing twilight, a figure emerged, a stranger, a deep-set frown etching the contours of his face. "Stay where you are," he commanded, eyes dark and hunting. The chilling reality of Edgar's secrets loomed above them, and Father Brown knew the surface of this mystery merely skimmed what lay below. What lay beneath the facade of a humble village was a world of anguish, betrayal, and despair waiting to be unearthed. The rag fell from Father Brown's fingers, and as he stepped forward to confront the unanticipated guest, he felt the weight of all the philosophy he had ever studied pressing down upon him. In that moment, he realized that the depths could be deadly, if they were not careful. "What do you know of Edgar Hayes?" Father Brown asked, voice steady, even as the suspense crackled in the air. But before the stranger could respond, an unearthly scream reverberated through the manor, shattering the tension like glass. It pierced the evening air, and in that instant, Father Brown understood the truth. While some secrets were buried beneath the surface, others awaited breathlessly at the brink, ready to erupt. and he was poised squarely in the middle with devastating choices ahead of him. The chapter closed with the unexpected scream echoing amidst the shadows, a chilling reminder that the darkest truths often dwell where light dares not tread. With each mystery unraveled came the certainty that the tale was far from over, a siren song tugging at the soul, a deeper darkness beckoning them on. Chapter 5. The Vanishing Heir. The morning fog lay thick over Kembleford, wrapping the village in a silvery shroud as Father Brown made his way along the cobblestone road, the crunch of gravel beneath his well-worn shoes breaking the stillness of the early hour. He had not intended to return to the Halliwells' manor so soon. However, the news of young Thomas Halliwell's disappearance tugged at his heart and mind alike. It was said that the lad had vanished during the night, leaving only a lingering question that swept through the village like the chill in the autumn air. As Father Brown approached the grand edifice of Halliwell Manor, he recalled the words of Miss Agnes Halliwell, Thomas's stern and matriarchal aunt. He must not be taken by the shadows of his forefathers, she had whispered during tea just days before. The words had puzzled him then, but with Thomas's disappearance, they now loomed ominously. The manor stood as a testament to lost glory, its once vibrant stone facade dulled by years and neglect. Ivy clung stubbornly to its walls, while the wind sang a mournful tune through the rotting wood of the porch. Father Brown stepped into the entrance hall, where the light struggled against the gloom, and found Agnes poring over a set of dusty ledgers strewn across an antique desk. Her normally composed facade was thoroughly disrupted, her fingers trembling as she turned the brittle pages. "Father Brown," she gasped, looking up abruptly, her voice quavering. "He's gone. My Thomas is gone. You must help us." "Calm yourself, Agnes," he replied softly. "Tell me everything you know. Start with last night." A flicker of shadow passed over her face as if a hidden memory stirred. "He was fretful," she began, her brow furrowing. "He couldn't sleep. I had offered him a cup of chamomile, but he insisted on wandering outside to find himself," he said. Her hands clenched into fists as if grappling with impossibilities. "He must have gone to the churchyard, but when I awoke this morning, he was nowhere." Father Brown's mind whirred with possibilities. He dismissed the notion of a mere teenage rebellion with a shake of his head. Has he been spoken to? The other villagers? Could he have encountered someone? Could he even have met the heir? Agnes muttered the last words, her eyes narrowing as she grasped a heavy brooch adorning her collar, a nervous habit he had always noticed but never questioned. "The heir?" Father Brown echoed, his curiosity piqued. Thomas's father, Harold. He never believed Thomas was fit to inherit Halliwell Manor. Rumor has it he intended to place the estate in the hand of a distant cousin. She paused, a flicker of emotion crossing her features. Together with the family's fortune, he planned to bolt the manor from us all. Father Brown nodded, his mind rattling off connections. "You and young Thomas, you are the sole guardians of the estate. What of the cousin? This man from whom you fear the inheritance?" "Alexander Hargrove," Agnes supplied, her gaze darting toward the family portrait looming on the opposite wall. "He's a cunning man, Father, always lurking, suggesting the worst of our family. I often felt he had aspirations far beyond mere blood ties." "Where can we find him?" Father Brown inquired, the puzzle deepening with every second. "And what of the ledger?" "The ledgers," she replied, gesturing vaguely to the pages. "Harold's records. They seem off. Perhaps he knew something. A hidden bequest?" Father Brown leaned over the desk, eyes scanning the lines of meticulous handwriting behind the curling paper. "Agnes, this ink," he observed thoughtfully. "It appears fresh. You've been copying these?" I wanted to make it better," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I thought if I reorganized them, or perhaps redacted." Father Brown's eyes gleamed with understanding as he straightened. "You feared Thomas would find something troubling, and in your haste, you damaged your own possibility to expose the truth. Please, Father, don't cast blame. I only wish to protect him. I have sacrificed everything for him." "I understand," he assured her, "but it must be truthful sacrifice." Suddenly, the manor's grand clock chimed, resonating through the hall like thunder. Father Brown's heart quickened. Time was running out. If Thomas was out in the fog, he could be anywhere. Yet, above the tolling, there was another sound, soft thumps, like a weight being dragged across the floor above them. "Did you hear that?" Father Brown asked sharply, instinctively moving toward the staircase that spiraled upward. Agnes nodded, paling visibly. "It's probably nothing, just the old house settling." But Father Brown knew better. "The house hasn't settled yet," he replied, his voice keen with urgency. "Stay here." He ascended carefully, each step creaking beneath him, the atmosphere heavy with dread. The corridor above was dimly lit, the air stagnant and cold. As he rounded the corner, he glimpsed what appeared to be a figure at the end, cloaked in shadow. "Thomas," he called out, his voice steadying himself as fear gripped his heart. There was no reply. Drawing closer, Father Brown noted a small door ajar at the end of the hallway. Gritting his teeth, he moved slowly, each breath a whisper of hope amidst confusion. He pushed the door open, revealing an attic room choked with dust and remnants of old furniture. Then he saw it, an overturned chair, an old trunk, displaced, a scrape upon the floorboards leading into darkness. And in that moment, he caught sight of something glimmering at the edge of the dark. A wristwatch, engraved with the initials TH. As he reached for it, a sudden clang echoed behind him, a sound that drove deeper terror into the marrow of his bones. The door was slamming shut with an ominous finality, and Father Brown felt the prickly awareness that fate was unfolding his next challenge. The truth, hidden just out of reach, sprang backward, instinctively turning as the shadows loomed, his heart hammering in his chest. "Who's there?" he shouted. But no answer came. All he could feel were the walls closing in, just as he realized Thomas had to be close. But what terrors awaited him in Halliwell Manor? And who was lurking in the fog, waiting for the shadows to consume the air? The answer lay in the darkness, where the true mystery was just beginning. Chapter 6. A Will Unwritten. The damp chill of the November evening crept through the village of Kembleford and settled into the bones of its inhabitants. As the distant church bell tolled 8, the flickering gaslight cast long shadows in the cavernous halls of Hatherley Manor, lighting upon the portrait of its late owner, Lord Alexander Hatherley, a stern visage that stirred only unease among the residents of the manor. Father Brown stood in the entrance hall, an unassuming figure, a muted, brown robe cloaked against the chill, but the unease in the air tightened his gut. A scream shattered the silence, piercing through the manor walls like an arrow through flesh. Father Brown turned sharply as Lady Eugenia, the late lord's wife, staggered into the hall, hands trembling and face ashen. "It's Walter, my brother," she gasped, her voice quaking with panic. "He's dead." They rushed towards the library, its ornate mahogany doors silently guarding its secrets. Inside, the dimly lit room revealed Walter Hatherley sprawled in front of the grand fireplace, a pool of crimson spreading slowly across the Persian rug, an elegant pattern now marred by tragedy. Father Brown knelt beside the body, the flickering flames throwing an unsettling glow upon the lifeless form. Walter's eyes stared vacantly, and the glint of something metallic caught the priest's attention just beneath a spilled glass of port. That's when he noticed it. A scrap of parchment, half concealed beneath the handmade carpet. With careful fingers, he extracted the brittle paper, unfolding it to reveal a loopy scrawl, the letters trembling and uneven. It was a fragment of a letter written to Lord Hatherley that never reached its conclusion. "I cannot keep this from you any longer." As Father Brown scrutinized the writing, Lady Eugenia clutched her throat, her gaze darting nervously around the room. He came here to speak with Alexander about the will that never existed. Father Brown tilted his head, studying her. "So, you believe there was no will left by your husband?" She nodded vehemently, her eyes fixed on Walter's corpse. Alexander despised his family's wealth. He often said he would leave everything to charity, or more specifically, his beloved church. Yet Walter had a stake in his brother's fortunes, Father Brown mused, pulling the crumpled letter closer to the dim light. Interesting that he arrived on such a pressing matter to an extremely private household, right before the reading of a will that may or may not exist. It raises the unsettling question: why? Walter was desperate, Lady Eugenia breathed, shivering as she glanced away from the horror displayed before them. His investments, they were failing. He stood to gain thousands. I didn't believe him capable of murder, but you thought he was willing to do anything. Father Brown's gaze flickered towards her, trying to read the shifting expressions on her face. Precisely, Lady Eugenia. It's tragic. What desperation can drive a man to do? Nearby, Mr. Pilkins, the stoic butler, appeared, indignation tightening his features. "The constable is on the way, lady. I must report this." "Indeed," Father Brown's voice cut through the tension. "But first, we must reckon with the dead. Lady Eugenia, do you know if Walter was alone today?" I don't know," she stammered, guilt intertwining with fear. "He had always had affairs. Perhaps he met with someone?" "No, I can't think straight. I just didn't expect this." Father Brown stood slowly, an idea taking root in his mind. If a man arrives intent on a favor from his brother and does not find him at home, what might he do? Doesn't he venture forth in hope of finding the very thing he desires? Her eyes widened. "You mean someone was—" "Yes," Father Brown interjected, drawing closer to the fireplace, examining the scattered logs among the embers. The charred remains of some letters flickered through the ash, the remnants of old correspondence. Before Walter's death, there was a confrontation here. The fireplace has been recently stoked, but only half the letters were burned. Since they were in a private estate, one wonders what was worth destroying. "Except that it leaves visible evidence," Lady Eugenia finished, her voice trailing off in realization. Suddenly, the steady rhythm of footsteps echoed from the corridor. The constable arrived, a burly man named Sergeant Bunce, who glowered at the gruesome scene before him. "What's this, then?" Father Brown gestured towards the body. "And so it begins, a figure inside a tangle of greed, desperation, and whispers that only the dead can tell." Just as he spoke, a flash of recognition crossed Lady Eugenia's features, her expression shifting from shock to horror. No, surely not. It wasn't supposed to come to this. Father Brown turned sharply, curiosity piqued. Lady Eugenia, what do you mean? I must speak to you in private, please, she pleaded, glancing at the constable as if recalling some hidden knowledge that linked her brother and husband in a darker game. Very well, he conceded, stepping aside, but uncertainty twisted within him as he began to grasp the arcane connections she hinted at. Just tell me one thing. Was there a will? Before she could answer, a loud crash echoed from the hallway, drawing all eyes towards a door flung wide. A figure stumbled in, a young maid, her face pale as death. There's an intruder, she gasped, clutching a tattered envelope that had fallen from her hands. He was looking for something, and I think... Father Brown approached her as she trembled. What was he searching for? Her eyes flickered towards the fireplace, where the letter remnants lay. That, I think. And Mrs. Hatherley told me to keep it hidden. A shiver coursed through Father Brown, the threads of the mystery weaving tighter. And then he saw the crest on the envelope. It was unmistakable, the same one that marked Lord Hatherley's last correspondence. In the dim light of the manor, the room seemed to quake with secrets that danced in the air, as yet unspoken, but aching to be revealed. As Father Brown looked between the stunned faces around him, he recognized the harsh truth. A will unwritten was perhaps a threat, greater than any penned by a hand before life took it away. What secrets did it hold that threatened murder, betrayal, and maybe even worse? Just as the tension reached its peak, the clock struck, shrilly, and in that, Father Brown sensed the tempest lurking in the impending chaos. In the silence that followed, it was clear. The truth awaited, and the shadows deep below them had drawn the curtain tightly under the flickering candelabra. Chapter 7. The forgotten diary. Father Brown stepped lightly through the fog-laden streets of Kembleford, each footfall stirring the damp chill clinging to the cobblestones. The tranquil village lay shrouded in a thin veil of mist, transforming familiar paths into ghostly corridors. His breath fogged before him, dissipating like the lingering echoes of secrets long buried. On this particularly somber morning, he found himself ruminating over the recent murder of Caroline Murdoch. The case had gripped the village in an icy hold, and the gradual unraveling of the web surrounding it was leading him deeper into the shadows. Passing the rectory, he paused, noting the smoky tendrils curling from the chimney of the old Gresham Manor. This was the home of Lady Agatha Gresham, an eccentric widow whose affinity for the peculiar had only increased since the death of her husband. The villagers regarded her as odd, but Father Brown sensed that beneath her peculiarities lay revelations worth pursuing. He ascended the creaking steps of Gresham Manor, the wood groaning under his weight, and knocked gently. The door swung open, and there she stood, eyes as dark as a winter's night. "Father Brown," she drawled, her voice soft, but edged with a hint of nervousness. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Lady Gresham, I came to inquire about Caroline," he replied. "Might I have a few moments of your time?" "Of course," she replied, stepping aside, "but I fear our discussions may be tinged with the unspeakable." As she led him to the study, he caught a glimpse of her hands, tremors rippling through her fingers, betraying a deeper anxiety. The study was steeped in a perplexing atmosphere, shelves lined with tomes on the occult, a mantel adorned with peculiar relics of ages past. On the walnut desk lay an array of papers, but it was an old, leather-bound diary that seized Father Brown's curiosity. "Ah, that," Lady Gresham scoffed lightly. A relic of my husband's, something to be tossed into the fire, really. His musings had little merit. Yet, there is always value in the forgotten, he mused, gently picking it up. As he opened it, the musty smell of aged paper wafted through the air as if it had been hidden for too long. The ink had faded, but certain passages still shone with clarity. "May I?" he invited himself, brushing aside her uncertainty with a soft smile. As he flipped through the pages, dense with his late husband's elaborate handwriting, he stumbled across something that made his heart race. A name. "Elizabeth," he murmured. "Pardon?" Lady Gresham had a stiffened posture now, with brows knitted tightly. "Did your husband ever speak of Elizabeth? Someone he cared for in his youth?" "Mostly forgettable," she replied tersely, the tremors in her hands escalating. "A rural romance, ended swiftly. It was hardly ever mentioned. Yet here it lingers, even years later," Father Brown observed, excitement flashing in his dark eyes. "Perhaps a buried affection, perhaps more, or a mere folly of an infatuated youth," she countered, swallowing hard, and her tone now held an edge of defensiveness. Father Brown's mind danced between suspicion and insight. He continued to read until he reached an entry dated just weeks before her husband had succumbed to a long illness. "This entry," he began, his thoughts aligning like stars, "speaks of a confrontation. Elizabeth found me, uninvited, at dawn. The letter, it cannot find its way." "What letter?" Lady Gresham's composure shattered, her voice quivering like the flame of a candle. "Enough of this. My husband's secrets are not yours to unearth." "Secrets often hide truths," he replied, his eyes unwavering. "And the truth may very well unveil the motives behind Caroline's death." "Do not presume," she spat, her eyes glinting with deeply felt fear. A fleeting silence enveloped them, the tension palpable in the thick air. Then, as he set the diary back on the desk, Father Brown's attention was drawn to a framed picture on the wall. A charming young woman, the very image of light and mischief, yet there was something haunting behind her smile. "Is this Elizabeth?" Lady Gresham's gaze followed, her chin rising. "Why does her name haunt you so?" "Because it holds the key to your husband's past, a past that might relate to Caroline's very present." He could feel the walls tightening as Lady Gresham's expression wavered between fury and vulnerability. A sudden wind howled outside, rattling the window panes and shivering the room's ambience. Just then, the door swung open, and in stormed the village constable, his face alight with urgency. "Sir, Lady Gresham, there's been another incident at St. Mary's." Lady Gresham's face paled dramatically. "Another death?" The constable's expression darkened deeper than the approaching storm beyond the window. "Not just that. It's the grave. It's been desecrated." Father Brown's heart sank at the implication, his mind already connecting the threads of Lady Gresham's frayed sanity, Caroline's tragic fate, and the existence of that errant letter. "A letter to Elizabeth, or perhaps from her," he mumbled, piecing it together. He turned to Lady Gresham, who was visibly shaken, the truth edging ever closer to the surface. "Lady Gresham, what can you tell me about—" "Enough!" she cried, erupting with a fierce energy that seized Father Brown's words. "You cannot understand, Father. Not without knowing what truly lies in the depths." Before he could respond, she dashed to the hearth, the flames reflecting a wild, manic fervor. "This," she declared, pulling out the poker, "is a matter best left buried far deeper than you seek." In the looming silence, Despite the chaos crowning the threshold into madness, the implications of the diary lay heavy upon Father Brown's thoughts. As he contemplated the outline of secrets unraveling and lives intertwined in treachery, the sinister revelation Lady Gresham's eyes struck fear. What had she buried in her heart? Before he could piece together yet another riddle, she took a step backward. Poised to defend the memories she refused to let die. All at once the storm's fury erupted, hurling rain against the walls and wrestling secrets long locked away. "Lady Gresham, let us not forsake what is right," he pleaded with urgency, but in that moment she had already crossed the threshold into darkness. Father Brown's own thoughts swirled into a frenzy. The diary, the grave, and the deranged frantic fears now aligned, leading him to the unspeakable connection. Would he uncover Lady Gresham's truth before yet another life was snuffed out? The stakes were unbearably high, and the air crackled. Time was perhaps slipping through his fingers like the very ink on the diary's pages. A tangible despair filled the room, mirroring the storm beyond, as Father Brown braced himself for whatever truths lay ahead, forever tangled in the shadows of the forgotten. Chapter 8. Shadows of the Past. The evening air hung heavy with an unsettling mist as Father Brown ambled down the narrow cobbled streets of Kembleford. He could feel the weight of grief enveloping the village, ever since the tragic demise of Lady Penelope Ashford. Her murder had poisoned what was once a serene community, casting shadows over every familiar nook and cranny. Now, a shroud of uncertainty seemed to seep into the quiet corners of the parish, pregnant with whispered fears of buried secrets. As he approached the church, he noticed something unusual. The old cemetery, shrouded in fog, bore a different ambience. A flickering lantern cast an ethereal glow upon a lonely grave. Suddenly, a figure emerged, pacing anxiously near the weathered tombstone of Baron Radcliffe, Lady Ashford's enigmatic grandfather. Father Brown quickened his pace, his instincts flaring. He knew well that vulnerability often led to reckless truths. "Good evening, dear sir," Father Brown called, stepping into the lantern's light. It illuminated the face of Harold Cummings, local historian and a man with a notorious penchant for unearthing uncomfortable pasts. "You seem rather agitated this night." "Oh, Father," Cummings replied, voice thick with apprehension. "You must help me. I was doing some research into the Radcliffe estate and stumbled upon something terrible." He lowered his voice, glancing around as if shadows themselves might overhear. "This tombstone holds truth that was meant to remain buried." "What kind of truth?" Father Brown inquired, his heart quickening as he felt the pulse of something sinister taking shape. "Records show that Baron Radcliffe was linked to some unsavory dealings, riddled with debts and rumors of foul play. He vanished, presumed dead, and yet his treasure was never recovered. But the Ashfords, they still live on his legacy, hidden behind walls of deception," Cummings whispered, his voice barely above the rustling leaves. Intrigued, Father Brown leaned closer. Could there be a connection between the long-lost fortune and Lady Ashford's recent murder? But before he could dive deeper, Cummings' attention was drawn elsewhere. "Father, do you see that?" He pointed to a shadow lurking amid the mist. "Someone is watching." Sure enough, a silhouette took form in the distance. The figure was slight and stooped, almost spectral against the monochrome backdrop. The pastor's heart raced as the dark figure drifted closer, revealing the ashen features of Mrs. Hattie Tompkins, the village gossip and formidable matriarch. Now, "What have we here?" Mrs. Tompkins cawed, her voice resonating with derision. "Out past curfew, are we? A historian and a priest, come to stir the bones of the dead?" "Merely seeking truth, Mrs. Tompkins," Father Brown replied gently. "And you? What brings you to this ghostly gathering?" "The truth," she echoed, a scoffing brilliance lighting her eyes. "The truth is that Lady Ashford tried to cover up the ashes of her family's past. Vows secured with blood, they say. The buried treasure? Just a distraction from the real horror, her lineage cursed." She cackled melodically, a sound that belied her words' chilling implication. "And such rumors are worth their weight in gold," Cummings interjected. "But behind every whisper is a reality too painful to confront. You won't find your fortune, dear lady, for the price of digging up old graves may be too close to home." Before any further scenes could unravel, the wind howled, rustling the leaves with urgency, culminating in the sound of a breaking branch. The three turned abruptly as a glint of moonlight revealed the gleam of a metallic object on the ground near the tombstone, a tarnished pocket watch, its inscription barely legible, adorned with a family crest that was unmistakably that of the Ashfords. "Harold," Father Brown said, his brains spinning, "do you recognize this crest?" "Yes, indeed. It belonged to Lady Ashford's late father," Cummings replied, astonishment mingling with confusion. "But how did it end up here?" "The story we tell ourselves is sometimes but a shadow," Father Brown mused. "This watch suggests a connection not just to Lady Ashford, but perhaps to her father's unfinished business." Mrs. Tompkins leaned in, intrigued. "You think the watch might lead us to the murder? Why would it be here? Or indeed, who might have placed it here to set us on the wrong path?" he replied sharply, eyes piercing the shadows. The fog danced eerily around the graves, but not just from the night air. Father Brown could distinctly feel something electric in the atmosphere, a thread being tugged at in the fabric of their search for truth. Suddenly, the distant tolling of the church bell rang. Midnight. "We must return to the parish," Father Brown insisted. "There are too many veils hiding what must be revealed. Darkness breeds danger. We cannot linger." Mrs. Tompkins shot them both a mingled glance of fear and satisfaction. As Cummings turned to leave, Father Brown's instincts prickled once more. Shadows writhed at the edges of the churchyard. "Wait," he called, halting the historian. "What if this has only begun?" His voice grew solemn. "Roots run deep, and sometimes, in digging up shadows, we cast light only on new darkness." As they retraced their steps, the pocket watch dangled heavily from Father Brown's fingers, an unnerving promise resting in its ticking echo. But no sooner had they reached the path than the roar of chaos erupted from the manor ahead. A scream shattered the tranquil night. Father Brown exchanged a glance with Cummings and Mrs. Tompkins, a shared horror closing in. "Perhaps the secrets of the past are not so easily left undisturbed," he breathed, dread pooling in his stomach as they raced toward the chaos, each step heavier with the weight of imminent revelation. In the distance, the shadow of a figure fled from the manor, disappearing into the mist, leaving only the echo of unsettling laughter in its wake. The priest gripped the watch tightly, knowing with stark clarity that the shadows of the past were alive and threatening the future, and that they had no choice but to confront them. Chapter 9. The Final Confrontation. The fog hung thickly over Kembleford, shrouding the village in an eerie silence. Father Brown stepped lightly through the damp grass of St. Mary's churchyard, his heart quickening as he grasped the crumpled note he had found just moments before in the creaking old manor house belonging to Lady Agatha Wykeham. It was a missive penned in a hurried hand, its ink smudged as if it had been hastily concealed. "Meet me at the old mill. Midnight. We end it tonight." The words dripped with an ominous finality. His mind raced as he recalled the tragic events that had unfolded over the past few weeks. The village had been rocked by a series of bewildering crimes: the theft of Lady Agatha's prized emerald necklace, followed by the mysterious death of her housekeeper, Mrs. Glanville. Each clue had led back to a tangled web of jealousy and betrayal, with Lady Agatha at its heart, her chilling demeanor unsettling even the bravest souls in their quaint community. Father Brown stopped by the weathered stone grave of Jeremiah Prowse, a local butcher who had vanished a fortnight past, the townsfolk whispering of his gambling troubles and debts owed. The whispering gossip suggested foul play, but Father Brown had suspected all along that Jeremiah's disappearance was tied to something deeper, a malignancy seeping through the heart of Kembleford. As he stood, his breath misting in the cold air, memories surged. A particularly vivid conversation with Inspector Yupp returned to him. "Revenge has a way of unearthing secrets, doesn't it?" the inspector had mused, absent-mindedly polishing his spectacles. Father Brown had nodded, knowing they were on the cusp of something significant. Just then, a rustle drew his attention. Emerging from the shadows, a figure materialized, cloaked in the fog. It was Penelope, the village gossip and the most spirited of Lady Agatha's erstwhile friends. Her eyes, wide and glistening, mirrored the fear churning within Father Brown as she approached. "Father, you must help," she gasped, her voice barely rising above a whisper. "I overheard. I went to warn Lady Agatha, and I overheard a dreadful plan. Someone seeks to harm her." Father Brown, recognizing the weight of her words, felt a surge of urgency rise within him. "Who, Penelope? We must act quickly." "It was—" She swallowed hard, casting fearful glances around the graveyard. "It was Lord Frederick." Father Brown's mind raced as he recalled Frederick Langford, a distant cousin of Lady Agatha, whose appearance in the village had stirred unwelcome memories from Lady Agatha's past, a bitter rivalry over love and inheritance. Why would he want to harm his own kin? Father Brown asked, though he could feel the pieces starting to align. Jealousy, Father. The emeralds. He believed Agatha had stolen their fortune after their father died. Lord Frederick has concealed his motives well, too well. And now, with the housekeeper gone, Penelope's voice trailed, fear overtaking her composure. Father Brown raised an eyebrow, not willing to allow suspicion to settle too easily. So he would rather see her dead than forgive. "Forgiveness is a luxury he cannot afford," she cried, a tremor in her voice. "You must go to the mill." But Father Brown interrupted. "No, we must bring the others. This is more than a simple quarrel. We need evidence, and we need protection." As they started towards the entrance of the churchyard, Penelope pivoted sharply, her expression shifting. "Wait, what if Takahiro is involved?" she suggested, recalling the reclusive artist who had recently arrived in their midst, a man shunned for the eccentric ways he had treated his canvases. He was seen lurking by the Wykeham estate. Takahiro remained sketching near the pond when the theft occurred. Father Brown countered gently but firmly. "Still, we will not dismiss anyone completely. Suspicion can cloud the mind, dear Penelope." The urgency surged as they stepped into the cobbled streets, mist swirling around their feet. They quickened their pace, but as they neared the old mill, a shadow slipped between them. Lord Frederick, face twisted with rage and mischief. "You've come to meddle, have you?" he sneered, revealing silvered teeth in a wolfish grin. "You should heed the warnings, Father Brown. Intrude too far, and you will lose far more than a friend." Father Brown's heart sank. The confrontation had come to fruition sooner than he had expected. "Frederick," he replied calmly, "it is not threat that you should worry about, but the truth that you cannot escape." A twisted laugh escaped Lord Frederick's lips. "Truth? There is no truth in love, Father, only the games we play or the punishment we enact." Penelope, shaking, added hastily, "You don't have to do this, Frederick. Lady Agatha is your family." "Ah, but is she, Penelope? Did you know that my family disowned her the moment she laid eyes on the emeralds? They were meant for me, you see, a piece of birthright I was denied." Father Brown stepped forward, gripping his rosary for fortitude. "Jealousy does not make a thief a nobleman, Frederick. Crime only deepens the wound." "Spare me your sermons, Father," Frederick spat. "Tonight, the mill will witness a reckoning." He raised an object glinting in the moonlight, a dagger. The sharp intake of breath from Penelope filled the silence as Father Brown's mind raced to keep pace with the unfolding drama. "You can't," he shouted, nearly unrecognizable in intensity. "You must understand the consequences." With a surge of daring, Frederick stepped back. "Sometimes, Father, the only way to cleanse oneself of sins is by casting them aside." He turned abruptly, disappearing into the swirling fog, leaving behind only the whisper of discontent that hung in the air like a thick mist. Father Brown exchanged worried glances with Penelope, the night more sinister than they had ever imagined, leaving them with more questions than answers. The dagger, left forgotten, gleamed against the mildewed stone of the mill. "Father, we can't let this go unchallenged," Penelope urged, her voice taut with urgency. "Indeed not," Father Brown replied, steeling himself with a resolute nod. "But the heart of the matter is yet to be uncovered. Perhaps the night has more to reveal than we know." As they stepped toward the mill, a darker shadow flickered in the distance, cloaked by the night, their resolve solidifying just as a scream fractured the stillness. Coming upon the cold, moss-covered stones of the mill, Father Brown and Penelope stepped inside, the musty air thick with tension. Their eyes adjusted to the dim light, and ahead, something twinkled near the water's edge. A glint. A clue or a trap, it beckoned them closer. But as they approached, the atmosphere shifted. It was a piece of the shattered emerald necklace, imbued with secrets yet to unravel, much like the village itself. With dread settling in his heart and a shiver racing down his spine, Father Brown clenched the pendant tightly. "We must be ready, Penelope," he whispered, aware that the quiet village of Kembleford was about to erupt. The face of the killer, masked by innocent smiles, was about to be revealed, and they were caught in the very middle, spiraling toward the truth or a final betrayal. The clouds above grew ominously dark, veiling the moon as Father Brown and Penelope stood on the precipice of discovery, where the line between friend and foe blurred like the creeping fog, dreadful, profound, and unwearied. Chapter 10. The trap is set. The chill of the early morning fog blanketed Kembleford as Father Brown paused at the wrought-iron gates of St. Mary's Church, his breath curling in the frosty air like a whispered prayer. The villagers had begun to gossip more fervently than usual, and even in his peace-laden life, a sense of urgency crackled in the frosty air. The recent murder of Lady Agatha had left the village uneasy, its quaint streets now haunted by hushed conversations and quickened glances. As he stepped into the churchyard, The familiar creaks of the ancient gravestones echoed ominously, yet he felt a magnetic pull toward the vicarage, where he hoped to find the restless spirits of the night distilled into something coherent by a good pot of tea. It was there that he discovered the door slightly ajar, a hint of movement inside catching his eye. "Mrs. Whittaker," he called, stepping in, the inkling of something wrong lingering in his heart. The vicarage was dust and echoes, but a sudden crash from the study sent a shiver up his spine. Abandoning his cautious approach, he hurried towards the sound, his heavy footsteps drowning out the silence. Inside the study, he found Mrs. Whittaker, the housekeeper, kneeling by the shattered remnants of a porcelain vase, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Oh, Father, you must come quickly," she gasped, cradling an object in her palm, a bloody handkerchief, embroidered with a distinctive initial, A. Father Brown's brow knitted in disbelief. "This belongs to Lady Agatha," he deduced quickly, shifting his gaze from the handkerchief to Mrs. Whittaker's distressed visage. "You found it here? How?" "I was cleaning the shelves, and it must have fallen when I knocked the vase," she stammered, her voice growing weaker. "But I fear—" She hesitated, the weight of her uncertainty palpable in the air. "I fear that the killer may return." "I see," Father Brown replied, his mind racing with possibilities. That would explain the fragmented vase, its history mingling with an even darker tale. Pushing the chilling thought aside, he examined the handkerchief closely, its once vibrant fabric, now a tragic emblem of chaos. An embroidered A was not merely a mark of ownership, it suggested intimacy. With each passing moment, the entangled web of relationships in Kembleford pinched tighter around him, leaving little room for innocent mishaps. With Mrs. Whittaker now agitated and her grip on her emotions faltering, Father Brown opted to diffuse the tension with a gentle, guiding inquiry. "You mentioned fearing the return of the killer. Why do you think that?" She looked up, the fear shining in her eyes like a beacon through the fog. "Because the lady had conversations, Father. Conversations about the manor's inheritance, and Mr. Hill, the groundskeeper. He argued with her just days before she died. He was discontented, unappreciated." Her voice faltered, deepening the shadows over her words. He didn't take kindly to her dismissive tone. "Some say he—" "Enough, Mrs. Whittaker. Let's not stir illusions with half-truths," Father Brown interrupted, the shuddering echo of her anticipation filling the room like thick smoke. "But we would do well to keep Mr. Hill in our sights." Intent on exploring this thread, Father Brown decided to pay a visit to Hill's modest dwelling as the mist began to dissipate. The blooming of life around him did little to ease the dread coiling within. With each step on the gravel path leading to the woodshed, he inspected the surroundings keenly. He noted the pruned hedges and the oddly tidy stacks of firewood, evidence of either attentiveness or an attempt at deception. He knocked softly, the wood creaking in greeting, and after a short silence, Mr. Hill reluctantly appeared, a brow furrowed in suspicion. "What is it, Father? May we have a word?" Father Brown's voice was steady, his gaze a warm invitation rather than an interrogation. "It pertains to Lady Agatha." Mr. Hill stiffened, increasingly aware of the implications behind the inquiry. "I didn't see her much. She had her favorites, and I was not among them." His tone held a hint of bitterness that sent ripples through the pall of the woodshed. Father Brown noticed an array of tools hung neatly on the wall, and in his mind began to weave connections, drawing on how anger and jealousy can distort an individual entirely. "Jealous of the lady's favor, were you?" Father Brown prompted gently, observing the slightest twitch of Hill's jaw. "Favor?" Hill scoffed, his eyes narrowing from shock to indignation. "Her wealth meant little to me. You seek respect, Mr. Hill. It's a natural human desire." Father Brown interjected, watching the groundskeeper closely. "But perhaps there's something more, a secret you've held too tightly." "I don't," Hill stammered defensively, yet something flickered in his eye, a glint born not of contempt, but of hidden knowledge. The emotional fabric of their conversation was fraying. Before Father Brown could dig deeper, the crack of a branch echoed from the green beyond, pulling their attention away from the momentary tension. The woods felt alive with whispers, as if they were listening, eagerly awaiting the unwrapping of truth, buried beneath layers of fear and pretense. "We'll resume our conversation later," Father Brown decided, a fresh resolve dawning in his mind, but the instinct stirred anew within him, a sharper, savvier thinness of danger. As he walked away, his mind whirled with potential conclusions, but ultimately, the path remained shadowed. Just as he crossed back into the village, the figure of a woman darted past him, a swirl of fabric, and an intensity in her gaze that made his heart race. It was Mrs. Tremaine, Lady Agatha's closest friend. Agitated, she appeared transfixed by her own thoughts, an unreadable cadence pulsing beneath her polished exterior. "Father Brown," she called out, urgency quickening her steps. "You must hear me. I know who the killer is. It's—" But before she could finish, a piercing scream tore through the air. Father Brown spun around just in time to see Mrs. Tremaine clutching her throat, eyes wide in terror as a figure loomed from the fog behind her. In that suspended moment, Father Brown's heart pounded. He was on the cusp of revelation, yet consumed by uncertainty. The fog thickened again, as if the very village conspired against clarity. He took a breath, understanding that danger was not just weaving through the village, it was the very essence of it. Thus, the trap was set. As twilight swallowed the village, Father Brown faced both the growing mystery and the desperate need to untangle truths before the murderer claimed another victim. Chapter 11. The Final Accusation. The chill of the fog clung to the leaves of the ancient trees that lined the path to St. Martin's Church, obscuring the quaint village of Kembleford like a haunting memory. The sun was a mere suggestion in the grey sky, trying desperately to break through the thick mist. Father Brown, a figure of quiet strength, adjusted his hat as he stepped cautiously through the village square, his eyes scanning the dull streets for any sign of life. It was a morning that felt heavy with secrets, and as he approached the churchyard, an unsettling sensation gripped him, nagging at the back of his mind. He was met with a sight that quickened his heart. A figure sprawled unceremoniously across the gravel path, leading to the church's heavy wooden doors. It was Evelyn Rookwood, the local heiress, well known for her strong will and poignant creations in the world of literature. The fog enveloped her like a shroud, her once vibrant face now pale as a moonlit shadow. Father Brown rushed to her side. "Evelyn!" he called out, kneeling beside her. He could see the faint rise and fall of her chest. Relief washed over him, mingling with the horror of the situation. Having been embroiled in the mysterious deaths surrounding Kembleford for weeks, he instinctively scanned the area for signs of foul play. The scene was curiously absent of any signs of struggle. Her handbag lay untouched a few feet away, and the morning chill deepened the stillness of the air. As he leaned closer to her, the faint scent of lavender reached his nostrils, a peculiar note amidst the damp earth. The sound of footsteps crunched through the gravel, and Lady Winifred, the widow who had been at the centre of much of the village's recent tumult, hurried over with agitation apparent in her features. "Father, what has happened?" she gasped, holding her lace handkerchief to her mouth as though to contain her shock. "She's alive, but we must get her to the rectory. Her pulse is weak." Father Brown gently lifted Evelyn, cradling her against his shoulder, while Winifred rushed ahead to open the rectory door. Once inside, Father Brown laid Evelyn upon the settee, applying a damp cloth to her forehead, hoping it might rouse her. Back in the churchyard, his mind pivoted between the conversations that had marked the village's recent weeks. Evelyn had been working on a scandalous novel that mirrored the lives and secrets of those around her, each character an echo of local figures close to the hearts of her neighbors. The implications were dizzying. He had overheard whispers. Many considered her writing a thinly veiled attack, a spattering of ink designed to expose sins best left hidden. After what felt like an eternity, Evelyn's eyelids fluttered open to meet his concerned gaze. "Father Brown, the letter," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "What letter, Evelyn?" he urged gently, adjusting the cloth. "The one in the library. It says everything." Before he could ask more, a loud clap resounded from the door. It swung open violently, revealing Inspector Mallory, a tall figure with sharp features set into a permanent frown. "What's going on in here? I was alerted of an incident." "Evelyn has fainted," Father Brown explained. "She needs care, not accusations. Let her rest." But Mallory's gaze flickered over to the scattered items on a nearby table, including an inked fountain pen and a crumpled piece of parchment. "This doesn't seem right. A writer's tools, perhaps, followed by fainting spells? Someone's been busy." Evelyn lifted her head slightly, defiance igniting her spirit. "Do you accuse me of a charade, Inspector? I've been under immense pressure with my work." "I'm merely seeking clarity, Miss Rookwood," he replied, his voice cold as the wind outside. "As you may know, there have been far too many unfortunate deaths around here, and your writing hasn't exactly endeared you to certain individuals." Father Brown interjected, "We must focus on Evelyn's safety, not on wild accusations. Her condition is the priority." But Evelyn, emboldened by the scrutiny, added, "I was close to a breakthrough with my book. There were threats made toward me, but I would never harm anyone. However, I'm afraid I might have made someone very angry with my writing." Mallory's brow furrowed, glancing between the two. "You're saying your novel inspired someone to violence. That's a dangerous game." Tension hung thick in the air, drawing everyone closer into the web of suspicion. "But what of Mr. Weatherby?" Father Brown proposed, remembering the figured man's unsettled demeanor during the last inquiry. "His family has deep-rooted animosities toward your themes, Evelyn. It's likely he lost his temper." Mallory nodded slowly, deep in thought. "A possible motive, but I suspect there's more to it." He began pacing, the clack of his shoes echoing off the wooden floorboards, when suddenly a low gasp escaped Evelyn's lips. "The letter, the one in the library, I think it names the one who hurt my family." She struggled to sit up, a flash of determination brightening her eyes. "It has a list of complaints and explicit threats. But it's not just a letter." Father Brown felt a shiver run down his spine. "It's a confession, isn't it? It must expose the one who feels so threatened by you that they'd resort to violence." Before he could finish, she winced, clutching her side. They'll stop at nothing to silence me. He moved forward, sensing urgency amidst the fetid tension. We must retrieve that letter, but we must be cautious. It may very well hold both the salvation and secrets of Kembleford. As they hurried toward the library, a thought dawned on Father Brown. If Evelyn was indeed in danger, the letter was both a weapon in the right hands and a target for anyone who wished to silence her. And like a thief in the night, the stakes grew higher. Would they arrive in time to unearth the truth before a final, deadly consequence concluded their search? Just as they crossed the threshold into the library, the door creaked ominously behind them. The abode held an even more sinister air than before, as if the shadows had shifted. And there, at the edge of his perception, a figure lingered just out of sight. Father Brown felt the shiver of dread slip through the very fibers of his coat. The moment of revelation was upon them, and the final act of this grim theatre awaited their decision on how to play it. Chapter 12. The Twist at the Graveyard. The graveyard lay shrouded in a thick grey mist that clung to the damp ground like a mourning veil. Father Brown stepped cautiously between the gravestones, glancing at the names etched upon the weathered marble. A chill ran down his spine, not from the cold, but from the eerie stillness that enveloped the air. It was an unsettling calm that followed the recent murder of Harold Winslow, the village's reclusive historian, whose lifeless body had been discovered in the manor of a distant relative just days before. Father Brown could not shake the feeling that the graveyard held more than just the departed. It whispered secrets of the living. As he paused by a gnarled yew tree, rustling leaves whispered confessions, and the scent of damp earth filled his nostrils. His hand brushed against an ancient headstone, part of the Winslow family plot, and he noticed a fresh bouquet of flowers laid reverently at its base. A vibrant pink rose amongst the withered daisies caught his eye, an unusual choice for memorials, especially in the autumn season. Kneeling down, he felt an unsettling jolt of recognition. It was a favorite flower of Helen Winslow, the victim's sister, a woman known for her guarded demeanor and acute intelligence. Her lingering sentiment, perhaps, or a potentially deep well of grief hidden beneath her solemn facade. A sudden noise shattered the stillness, a rattling of someone's shoes against pebbles. Father Brown turned sharply to find Helen approaching, her face pale and drawn, layered with concern and sorrow. "Father," she breathed, clutching her shawl tighter around her shoulders, I thought perhaps I could find him here. In a sense, I cannot believe that Harold is gone." Her voice trembled, revealing a wealth of emotion. Father Brown examined her closely. The way her eyes darted to the freshly placed flowers betrayed more than mere mourning. There was a flicker of something else, perhaps guilt or fear. "You cared for him deeply," he began gently, guiding her to speak further. "But if you don't mind me asking, do you know who placed those flowers?" Helen's gaze faltered, and for the briefest moment, a shadow passed over her features. "I do not," she replied, her tone inscrutable. "Harold was a difficult man. There were those who feared him, even in our family. But, Father, his murder, who could do such a thing?" "It is a question worth pondering," Father Brown replied, his fingers brushing the letters inscribed on the tombstone. "But sometimes the key to a case lies within its simplest details. We must look closely." Helen's eyes glimmered with a mix of admiration and anxiety. "You think you can find the one responsible?" she asked, half hoping, half doubting. "Indeed, and in such matters, it is often the quietest voices that roar the loudest. As he spoke, a flicker of movement caught his eye near the edge of the graveyard. A figure clad in a long coat, face partially hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, appeared to be furtively observing. Just as quickly, the figure melted back into the mist. "Did you see that?" Father Brown pointed toward the retreating shape. "I believe someone is watching us. It may be worth our time to uncover who it is." With that, they hurried in pursuit, their footsteps crunching on gravel. The mist thickened as they passed through the wrought-iron gate, which creaked ominously behind them, its voice fading into silence. They scanned the village square, before spotting a silhouette ducking behind a weathered elm. Father Brown narrowed his eyes, recognizing the figure. It was Reginald Thornbury, a distant cousin of the Winslows and an ambitious businessman known for his scheming mind. "What were you doing in the graveyard, Reginald?" Father Brown called, his voice steady and commanding. Reginald stepped into the light, trying to maintain an air of nonchalance. "Father Brown, what a surprise. I was merely taking a stroll. One must clear one's mind after the tragedy." "Clear your mind or cover your tracks," Father Brown pressed, noting how Reginald's hands trembled as he spoke. "I have nothing to say to you," Reginald snapped, but the quiver of his voice betrayed his bravado. "I dismissed any notions of a family feud. It's absurd." "Is it?" interrupted Helen softly, stepping closer. "We both know Harold had enemies. Can you tell us what you know of his research, or the records in the manor?" Reginald's smirk faltered as he caught Father Brown's penetrating gaze. "What business is that of mine? Harold was delving into matters of our family that were best left undisturbed, secrets that should remain buried." The tension thickened as Helen recoiled, a look of dawning horror crossing her face. "Secrets? What secrets did he discover?" "I said nothing," Reginald shouted, and then just as suddenly his expression morphed to one of forced calm. "But be careful how deeply you dig, dear cousin." Father Brown watched his retreating figure, aware that they had merely scratched the surface of deeper family intrigues. The air seemed to thrum with unsaid words and muddled truths, and a piece of the puzzle had slipped into place with Reginald's ominous warning. As they turned to leave, Father Brown's heart sank. A new realization dawned. It all connected back to the fresh flowers on the grave. Swallowing hard, he glanced back at Helen. "We must return to the manor. There is more at stake than we realize, and I fear a dark history is about to unravel." With an urgency in his step, Father Brown felt the weight of buried family secrets rising to the surface. As they navigated through the fog, one thought consumed him. Behind the mist of the graveyard lay the twisted truths of alliances and betrayals, and within those shadows, killers lurked. "Stay close, Helen," he instructed, his voice steady but laced with tension. "For what we may uncover could change everything about Harold's death and your family forever." Just as they reached the gate, an anguished shout echoed behind them. The fog swirled tighter, and without turning, Father Brown sensed the darkness around them growing. Yet within that darkness, a clue waited to be discovered, like a carefully buried secret that yearned to be freed.